My friends, the great experiment.
We should analyze the optical properties of this movie.
We've got 50,000 movies in the database. There must be something worth watching.
This is a movie house. This place isn't about function. It's about fantasy.
You could always read a book.
Welcome to Greatest Trek. It's a new Star Trek podcast from the makers of The Greatest Generation. I'm Ben Harrison, and today we are celebrating the Greatest Trek Film Fest. I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Adam Pranica.
And we've got a special guest on the program today, Adam.
Yeah, we were going to do this show, just us, the way we usually do. But our guest today had some thoughts about just doing the whole film festival as we're doing it, instead of doing Star Trek Prodigy. Great umbrage was taken by our guest about how we're spending our 6 weeks.
This could be the first time that we've ever had on a guest who's actively pissed at us.
Yeah. Yeah, what say you, Aaron Walke?
Yeah, hi. I'm on the podcast too. I came on here just to vent, like a call-in, angry C-SPAN caller. Obviously, I am getting a lot of messages from fellow friends of DeSoto who are like, when is Prodigy being covered? So maybe you could speak to that, because I certainly can't.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually.
Oh, okay. I can't wait to start it.
Look, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I have gotten a lot of compliments on this season. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the people that are eager and anxious to hear you cover it are because they also enjoyed it quite a bit.
I got to tell you that we've received 0 compliments about our choice of doing the film festival project. So we're in a very different headspace, I think.
If anyone listening hasn't picked up on this yet, Aaron Walke is executive producer on Star Trek Prodigy, one of the head writers of it. We feel so lucky to have you here and tolerating us doing this film festival.
My pleasure. I did appear on this podcast once before, and one of 2 comments reacting to it was, hey, you should introduce who this guy is in the show liners. I don't know who he is unless you tell me.
Awesome. I think you've made it between then and now.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, you've arrived.
I think in the Star Trek community, I am of note, at least.
Yeah. It's the greatest gen effect, really.
We asked you if you wanted to come on the show and what sort of movie you would want to watch, and you had some really interesting ideas. I thought it would be interesting to hear, about the movies that inspired you and maybe inspire your work in Star Trek, specifically geared towards your specific audience.
Oh, sure.
How did we end up on the Goonies?
Well, when you asked me what sort of movies was I inspired by, as a writer, I guess I was quick to bring up a lot of these Amblin 80s movies that I grew up with, that have been permanently tattooed on my brain. The Spielbergs, your James Camerons, your Robert Zemeckis. And
I think it's Roberts Zemeckis.
Oh, of course.
From the French.
The Greeks say octopodes, I think. Yeah, so that sort of storytelling where there's a high concept science fiction element, but it's used as a metaphor for some very real and grounded sort of coming of age, or at least a kind of emotional truth, usually geared around family or found family. It has always been my absolute jam. I think that it's no secret that a lot of the work that I've done over the years, whether it's Troll Hunters, Tales of Arcadia, or even Star Trek Prodigy, all evoke that sort of Amblin emotion where, there might be a cool alien in it, but it also functions as a metaphor for divorce. So, I thought that Goonies was a great kind of representative movie, not the least of which I think, was it Ben, you had not seen this film before?
This was my first time ever seeing Goonies, and I sat down to it going maybe I just didn't remember it, and I did see this movie, when it was raining at recess and they put it on the VHS cart at elementary school. And nope, had not seen this movie, had never seen a single frame of this movie, had no idea what kind of movie it was. I was guessing it was like I was picturing a little bit more of a I thought that there was going to be more like puppets and stuff, like a Garbage Pail Kids situation.
Wow.
So you thought this was going to be like Monster Squad or something? It's like you kicked the werewolf in the nards.
Yeah, or like Time Bandits-y energy.
Sure.
Like I thought that there was an element of high fantasy to it.
I would argue there is an element of fantasy, but it's much more magical realist, I would say, than it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no Captain EO beaming down.
I mean, with Corey Feldman there, you might have expected it.
This might be like the second or third movie I've ever seen with Corey Feldman in it. So
He's good at it.
Yeah,
I thought he was really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for picking this. This has long been in my cultural blind spot, and I'm glad that I've resolved that.
I'm going to be very interested in knowing this answer from both of you. At what age is the right age to show The Goonies? Because I watched this film for the first time very young and repeatedly.
Sure.
Like this was almost a babysitter for me for many years as films go. As adults, I guess for you, Aaron, like you saw it as a youth and now you're seeing it as a parent. Like, has your feeling about it changed in that way?
I don't think so. I do think that it is kind of evocative of a certain time period where it's now become a bit of a time capsule of a movie.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's necessarily an issue. It's really amazing when you break down the demographics of what becomes popular now, and kids are like, I like Star Wars, and you're like, oh really? It came out in 1979. But even for example, Stranger Things, which is like one of the top TV series available on television, one of the key demographics of our kids, like today's kids, watch that show, even though it is absolutely just a love letter to this era that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, I feel like that's a thing. Like when we saw The Simpsons as kids, it was all tons and tons of references to stuff that were cultural touchstones for like 2 generations ahead of us.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to say that Stranger Things is anywhere near as good a show as The Simpsons, but like that's something that happens over and over in culture.
No, it's true. I grew up like, why am I wistful for the 1950s? And I realized it's because boomers just arbitrarily decided that their childhood was the coolest decade ever made. and Back to the Future was like, gosh, wasn't it great back then?
The Robert Zemeckis were all in agreement on that.
But I would feel comfortable showing my daughter this film just about at any age. You know, there's like a gun in it, but I think maybe it's just evocative of my own childhood that everything had guns in it and there were kids getting shot at all the time.
For as often as I saw it as a kid, it has been a while since I've seen it as an adult, and I thought it looked beautiful in its restoration. Like to see it digitized the way it's been, like it's the best I've ever seen it. But I was reflexively like waiting for the moment that bumps a viewer when they go back and rewatch something from their youth that's like, oh man, that's too bad.
This had more slurs than I remembered, or whatever.
But that moment really never came for me in this film. I was delighted by that.
Yeah, they didn't have to replace the Fratelli's gun with a flashlight in this one.
Right. Well, that's a good place to dive into the film because the way this film begins is one of those spots that surprised me. So let's get into the 1985 hit children's adventure film, The Goonies, which opens with a prison break. I don't know why this surprised me so much. I think it's because every time I saw this movie as a kid, it had already begun. Like,
right. Somebody had put it on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what actually, just before the prison break, the actual first frame of the film is literally flying silently into the eye socket of a skull. And I feel like, what a flex to start your movie. Just not even like adventurous music, just we're going to slowly confront mortality.
It felt very Venture Brothers to me, both in that design and in its type.
Yeah, I believe they directly were referencing this with that. Yeah.
Robert Davi escapes from jail by posing as a person who has hanged himself.
Fun for the whole family.
The thing about that is this is a very strong anti-suicide message, which I love right out of the gate. Robert Davi's like, you think I'm stupid enough to kill myself? No fucking way.
Yeah, we have to talk about this stuff.
He's one of the Fratelli brothers. Mama Fratelli and Joey Pants, his brother, break him out by like lighting a ring of fire around the city jail. And yeah, this is like a police car chase worthy of Rambo. Like, it is that level of fun and good.
It felt very First Bloody due to the design of the police cars.
And the environment, like this, like coastal Oregon town looks just like Hope, Washington, or whatever Rambo was set in.
Yeah.
There are few things that Steven Spielberg, I think, enjoys more than turning city police officers into just incompetent buffoons, especially behind the wheel, because you see this in Gremlins too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's he probably just loves Keystone Cops and was like, the kids will love it.
There's some fun little vignettes in this police chase. A lot of people notice it around town. We see a couple of our characters that we meet, but we land on the Walsh house where we meet the Sean Astin and Josh Brolin characters, Mikey and Brand Walsh. And they're hanging out, and their friend Mouth comes over. This is the Corey Feldman character.
Hey guys, what's going down?
Get your foot off the table, Mouth.
You got it.
And it's like a no-good teen hanging with some no-good preteens around the house is the vibe.
Mouth, like, right off the bat, his introduction is quoting Groucho Marx and the Three Stooges in the 1980s. And I was trying to think of, like, what the equivalent of that would be today. And would it be like a Generation Alpha kid just being really into the first Matrix movie? Just won't stop talking about just Matrix 1.
Right. They dress like Neo, and you're like, really? Like,
I didn't have an older brother, but many of my friends did. And Brand as a type of brother felt so familiar to me. Just the, like, leave me alone sort of brother. The I'm trying to get chicks kind of brother.
Yeah.
Like that guy. And Josh Brolin's first movie.
Whoa.
I forgot.
I love that they cast two Hollywood Nepo babies in the Walsh household. They did, like, totally play as brothers, too. Like, I've never thought that Sean Astin and Josh Brolin look alike, but they totally look like they could be brothers in this movie.
So there's the specter of this upcoming move, and no one is looking forward to this. There's this creeping dread taking place, and it's not just between Mikey and Brand. It feels like every neighbor in this town is on their way out, and there's a fair bit of denial here that Mikey's got.
Yeah, the neighborhood is called the Goondocks, which is why they are called Goonies. And yeah, that right off the bat is that Amblin, like, depressing family drama that's just on the penumbra of the story that you don't want to talk about. So you go on a pirate adventure instead.
Last Goonie weekend. We gotta be going out in style.
Yeah, this movie came out right in the heart of the Rube Goldberg era of the 80s, where every character had an elaborate Rube Goldberg machine in their domestic context.
Yep.
And this one is a bowling ball triggered method that also involves a hen laying an egg in order to get the front gate of the house open when Chunk comes over to tell them about the police chase.
Yeah, is that something that Spielberg just was really, like, he was really Rube Goldberg pilled and just wanted to put that in every movie he produced? Like Back to the Future, which he also produced, starts with a Rube Goldberg machine.
If he was, you'd have to work very hard to get that pill. You have to wait a very long time.
I mean, Pee-wee's Big Adventure has a Rube Goldberg thing. Wallace and Gromit has a Rube Goldberg thing. I feel like this was just like, instead of saving the cat, they could just have a Rube Goldberg machine. And that's how we know we like them.
I think structurally you need to make sure that Mikey is on that kind of level with these constructions and puzzles and stuff to make it seem believable that he's capable of solving these things later on once they get in those caves.
Well, we also meet Data, the Ke Huy Quang character, and he's kind of his own personal Rube Goldberg machine. He's the Donatello of the group.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to the sewer for some fresh air.
Yeah, his jacket really functions as a bit of a TARDIS, really. Like, anytime they need anything to come out of it, it's bigger on the inside.
The Avengers have assembled, and they're all just kind of like hanging around the Walsh house, and Mama Walsh comes home with a lady named Rosalita who is going to help pack up the house because she has like an arm injury. Their mom has some arm injury.
Totally unspecified also.
Yeah. Like this was the one part of the movie where I was like, oh, this like maybe like wouldn't feel great if you were like a Spanish speaker watching this, but it's like, it's not what you worry an 80s movie is going to do with the Spanish speaking maid at all. It's,
if anything, she saves the day at the end.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
She's the secret protagonist of the series.
She doesn't speak English, so Mouth speaks Spanish to her and pretends to be translating for the mom, but is in fact like making up this insane situation at the house where Rosalita is going to be like kidnapped if she doesn't do everything exactly the right way or whatever.
Mouth isn't just fluent, like he's bit fluent, which is like the next level.
Yeah.
Like that's when you really have a grasp of the language.
And kudos to Chris Columbus for not going for the obvious trope joke, which was just he doesn't actually speak good Spanish and it's lost in translation. Instead, he's like, I speak fluent Spanish and I'm fucking with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Es una casa de locos, por Dios.
This is how we learn about the mysterious attic that Dad doesn't want anybody to go up into. So immediately, like, Mom and Rosalita leave, and everybody goes straight up to the attic to check out all of the relics and things up there. Bran finds a pirate book, and then a framed treasure map is uncovered by Mikey. And the game, as we say, is afoot.
The assumption that Chunk is going to fuck up any situation he's in, being so predictable, starts with this scene. Like that Mikey counts down the number of seconds it will take for Chunk to break the frame.
Yeah.
I thought was a delight to me.
And it's also funny that, like, it's clear that he did that just to, like, not to have plausible deniability on breaking the frame himself. Like, I didn't break it, Chunk broke it.
This movie is not anti-Chunk either. Like there are a lot of jokes at Chunk's expense, but everyone loves him.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, how Chunk is used by the other kids as more like a tool than a human being.
He is a device.
On more than one occasion to advance the plot. Like, he breaks open the map case. I think he knocks down a door later, and he's just a Swiss Army knife of a little sidekick. He's a Deus Ex Chunkina.
He's the Swiss Army knife that's like the real thick one with all the tools in it.
Yeah,
the magnifying glass.
Yeah.
And I will say this attic scene was probably one of the most impressive exposition scenes I have seen in a long time. Like, they go for, I think it's like a solid 10 minutes where they actually change subjects and every bit of it is purely just like lampshading, so you don't ask questions of like, they're like, yeah, my dad told me that the pirates dug all this stuff and then then the British blew up the entrance so it would be covered in there, so that's why they would be there. And how did they know about it? Well, a guy got out, but then he died, and then another guy talked about it, and that's how you know about it. So stop asking questions, asshole.
And we learn about One-Eyed Willie the pirate and Chester Copperpot, the treasure hunter who disappeared in the 30s looking for this treasure.
Yeah. My favorite part about that is like they spend so much time opening up the treasure, and it feels like that call to adventure of like, whoa, pirate treasure. And then just as you feel like they're about to go search for the treasure from the map, Chunk knocks over another newspaper, and it's from the 1930s, and it says at the top like, FDR starts the WPA. And at first it definitely plays like they're suddenly going to forget about the pirate treasure and instead go after Franklin Roosevelt's lost treasure instead.
Right.
Let's learn about the Great Depression.
But what if? What if? You guys, just what if? What if? What if?
So they're like, okay, this is cool. Like, if we could find this pirate treasure that is legendary in Astoria, Oregon, we could maybe pay off our houses and not have to sell off to the country club that's moving in. So the littler kids tie up Josh Brolin and let the air out of the tires on his bike and get on their own bikes and are off to go get this trash.
The look of Josh Brolin's body riding this kid's bike is one of the enduring visuals of the entire movie, I think. The way this is shot, how cartoonish it looks.
To get after them, he I guess it's Data's sister probably that's riding like a bike with training wheels at the front yard of their house.
And he's really cooking on it. Like, for a fixed speed, 1 gear bicycle, I think he's got up to like 20 or 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
The gears of this movie really fit together tightly because like his not having a driver's license is the reason for this, just as every other choice made in this film is because of a previous choice.
Right.
Totally.
And it in turn sets up him meeting who we will discover are future Goonies.
Right.
Exactly. So yeah, he's like riding along the road somewhere more bucolic than the town they live in, and a sweet drop top sports car shows up, and this like asshole kid is driving it and trying to look up Carrie Green's skirt, and Martha Plimpton is there also for some reason. And they grab Brolin and just like drive along really fast until he rockets off of a cliff.
They murder him effectively. Like they don't like he went, that's a cliff.
It's amazing if you're trying to cast an Andrew McCarthy, but like just different and maybe younger. Like the Troy character here had those vibes, I thought, utterly. For a hot second, I thought it maybe could have been him.
I would say that like the 1980s in particular are among their many triumphs, Reaganomics included, is the bully trope. I think they took something that existed and then they sculpted it and perfected it into like something that belongs in the Commedia dell'arte. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Steve Anton played Troy, and one of the bits of trivia I dug up was that he has kind of a famous family.
Oh, really?
You might be familiar with his last name. Robin Anton is the singer and dancer, and Jonathan Anton is the hairstylist, the famous Beverly Hills hair guy that had a reality show in the early 2000s.
Wow. So this really is just Nepo Baby, the movie.
Yeah.
So,
pretty fun.
So they're talking about this restaurant. Like the kids are like walking along the coast, and they took like a doubloon as one of the other relics that they took from the attic, and like they happen to just be standing in a place where some like coastal rocks in this restaurant fit within holes in the doubloon. And so they're like, that proves that the restaurant is where the treasure is.
Not taking into account soil erosion or the potential for earthquakes on the coast of Oregon.
Well, neither of those things ever goes on over there,
Plate tectonics.
Right.
I was just going to say it was a good enough beat that J.J. Abrams ripped it off directly for the last Star Wars movie. So
yeah,
steal from the greats.
That's true.
These Northwest coastal towns, like they really nail how this looks and feels. Like every one of these places has a rundown restaurant that's been closed for decades. It just feels...
That's so true.
It just feels like dark and wet and cold the entire time in this movie in a way that feels so real if you've ever been to one of these places.
Oh yeah, every kid had consumption. You could feel it creeping into their lungs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they see some of the crooks that we saw in the beginning go into this place, and they're like, well, that place is closed because it's a summer restaurant. It was like that place clearly wasn't open as recently as the summer. This is set in the fall. There's no fucking way.
They just don't take care of their restaurant at all.
There are cobwebs here that are 40 years old.
We're going to grab a bite down at Cobwebs. It's a theme restaurant.
Yeah, it would have been fun if there had been like a D in the window when they got up close to it.
If it was a pirate-themed tiki restaurant and that was just how things looked there,
right?
That would have been great.
Hindsight is 2020. Maybe the reboot.
So the kids go in and they immediately get caught by these gangsters who are like pointing guns at them and talking in Italian with each other so that the kids won't understand. Children in danger that is played for laughs in like the strangest way. They're all just going like,
I never felt like they were in mortal danger. Why is that? Like, there's a magic trick here.
I think that's the magic of the Chris Columbus, Joe Dante kind of like where there's sort of like a fun fantasy adventure quality, but there's always just a little bit of like dark humor laden over it that makes you feel like it's okay to put people in mortal danger and it'll work out.
I mean, like, on the heels of what we have learned about the tone of this movie from Josh Brolin on a little pink bicycle going over a cliff at 35 miles per hour, like, there's a Looney Tunes-ness to the violence in this movie that does make you feel safe.
Oh, yeah. I think they even use some Looney Tunes, like, sound library stuff, especially when Data fires his little... what is it called? Like the pinchers of power.
Pinchers of power.
And then he's like, he falls in the spring or whatever. It's like, boing,
Hey, Aaron, are you ever in on the cuts of Prodigy with notes like that? Like stuff that really you personally appreciate in sound design or whatever? Like, are you sneaking stuff into that show? Like you were the Hagemans that's like
sure.
Maybe only for you guys in that way?
Oh yeah, all the time. And sometimes we'll find things that are accidentally layered in there that add unintentional humor that we're in a otherwise serious moment that we have to pull out. Or
oh, cool.
I remember on Troll Hunters in particular, we had an ongoing joke for the longest time that anytime something flew off screen, you would hear like a pot break or an eagle screech. So like the editor's cut was just all pot breaks and eagle screeches.
That's like a very Naked Gun or Police Squad quality.
Yeah, it's very, very Zucker Brothers for sure.
Yeah.
So the kids are being held at gunpoint, but Mikey claims he needs to go to the bathroom. So he excuses himself and goes downstairs to look for the treasure in the basement, which is a very dungeony environment, the basement of this restaurant. And we just see the back of the head of a creepy monster that is chained up back there watching TV. And then Brolin shows up to rescue everyone. And like for some reason, the bad guys have just kind of like left them alone in the restaurant at this point.
Yeah, I did have to rewind. It's like, did I miss something? And I think that the plot simply called for it, and so they went off to maybe that was part of the director's cut, where it's like, you know what, we're out of Parmesan.
This begins like a solid 30 minutes of the movie where Josh Brolin's character need is to get them to all just go home right now.
Well, he has two. His character has two needs, which is get them to go home and to make out at the most inappropriate times.
Yeah.
I was paying attention. I think every time they're like, I think even in this scene, there's a very quick turn from discovering this howling giant seeming monster to then he just cozies up next to his would-be girlfriend. Is like, now? Should we kiss now? Or
the Andy thing is really interesting because it is more or less explicit that Andy is going with Troy, and yet she seems open to the idea of having other relationships in a way that does not make her a bad girl.
Right.
Or loose in the way that would be a way to make fun of her or whatever. She at all times seems like sincere and cool, and as 80s movie women go, like a viable romantic interest that is like made for crushing on.
Totally.
Like she was in so many movies of this decade, and I fell for her every time.
Yeah. I mean, there was like a passing mention of Brand like having a date with her the coming weekend or whatever. So yeah, it seems like she's just like, she's seeing people, but she's not sclusy.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. I think she, even when she's being lifted up on the bucket by, was it Troy?
Yeah.
When they lift it up and it's just the jacket she was wearing, it turns out that was in fact Troy's Letterman jacket. So she's just she's just fielding, her options.
And how great is that too, to be so direct with letting someone down and breaking up with them, not leaving them hanging.
Literally.
that is probably the iciest cold breakup of all time, right? Like, she didn't even text him. She just sent the jacket up on a bucket.
She said, I'll take my chances in the bottom of this unfathomable well rather than be with you.
Hey, Troy, this is me putting the lotion in the basket.
I'm wetter down here than I've ever been up there with you.
So the bad guys like all leave their hideout with a body in the trunk, and those girls from the car show up, and they like re-break into the restaurant by tricking Chunk into like running at the door. The girls are gonna leave, but then some like dead fish that are for some reason tied to the head of a rake that they accidentally step on scares them into going back inside and joining the group. And then they're like down in the dungeon, and they find this like hole in the fireplace because they break some like a water cooler, and that like leads to them discovering a trap door down there.
I always ever thought after this movie that part under a fireplace would always lead to something. Like there's any house with a fireplace that's configured that way always has a basement or some area that you could get into.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure your family loved that when you kept diving into every ash pit and just pulling out all of the grimy crap in the chimney.
Yeah.
There was like 25 years there where he was known as Sooty Adam.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I was Ashy Adam, which as I get older has become true.
Has become more and more true.
Well,
yeah.
Speaking of Ashy or Hal Ashby, there is a lot of crosstalk in this film, and I think especially once the girls join and it's a truly ensemble cast that is all in the same room in every single scene. I can tell you as a writer that is a very hard thing to manage and do it properly. You know, because inevitably you're going to leave people behind when you're focusing on one character versus the other. And so the fact that this movie kind of boldly does that, with the exception of taking Chunk and putting him with Sloth for, you know, the back half of the second act, you're still managing like 9 kids. And the fact they're always just kind of like talking and quipping.
Totally.
Sometimes there's so many quips happening at the same time that it's hard to hear them all because it's nonstop rapid fire dialogue that's overlapping each other. I thought it was just a really interesting choice.
Yeah, this movie is Altman-esque in that, and it's so weird to see that done like very capably by children. You know, like that's hard for adult actors to pull off well, and I thought they did a great job with it.
Did you have a number of characters in mind when you were conceiving of Prodigy, where like it would be too many in the way you're describing?
I mean, I think when we hit 7 with season 2, that was sort of like a cap for us. Of just like, I think there's a reason in Star Trek in particular that inevitably the away team is always like 3 randos because they don't want to send the entire bridge crew down, both for logistic reasons, but also just for practical reasons, like to have to cater to that many people in a scene. It defies your economy of characters.
Right.
But, that's kind of the beauty of being on an adventure like Star Trek, though, is like you can kind of pick and choose your party, like swap them in and out like an RPG game.
Right. Well, the adventure begins under this fireplace. And I really love that it represents like an escape from the Fratellis and also the adventure that they want to be on at the same time.
Yeah, this is the point of no return, the crossing of the threshold.
Yeah.
Most of them go down, but Chunk is sent up out a window to get the police, and we're following the kids in this like long tunnel while Chunk gets nabbed by the Fratellis. They do not let him get away, unfortunately.
And that's the end of the movie.
Do we not fear the Fratellis because they're Italian/Italian caricatures? Like, I'm still trying to drill down into this whole, like, these are gangsters with guns and bodies that they've hidden at this restaurant.
And they all kind of, like, hate each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think to kind of just continue to go down this movie that is evoking comedy that is from a previous era, with between the Groucho Marx type stuff and the Keystone Cops chases, I do think that like gangster films was a very specific genre that I think they must have felt okay evoking without, hitting any. I mean, I wouldn't say this movie leans on Italian stereotypes. If anything, like there's some of the choices were kind of surprising. Like, when you have the one of the Fratelli brothers just suddenly start shouting opera at Chunk when he's caught. Like, it's like, I guess that's Italian, isn't it?
Crazy how scary that was as a kid.
Yeah. And like Chunk starts praying in Hebrew at that moment. Also, I was like, what was that for?
It was for me, I think. Just a truly surreal moment that kind of breaks your brain a little bit, and you just go with it.
Yeah, not to mention the surreality of the kids in the cave. Like, they find all these pipes, and they're like, the only way out will be to bang on these pipes for some reason. So they start banging on pipes, and like, there's a bunch of like sight gags with, water fountains dipping into the ground and handles disappearing into the wall at the country club.
Yeah, I will say that not a lot of adventure movies would have the bravery to dedicate a full 7-minute sequence to a country club having plumbing issues.
Yeah. Troy gets water shot up his ass, and then like one of the pipes like bursts down where they are, and it like carves a hole in the wall, and there's more adventure on the other side of the hole, so they go in there.
The cast is very wet throughout most of this film. I would like to, I wasn't able to listen to the commentary track on this movie, but I gotta believe it had to be fairly miserable. And for as much fun as it looks to like go down water slides or whatever as a kid, like to be wet on set.
Yeah, all day.
For hours and hours. Like, I don't care who you are, that has to suck.
Well, from what I have heard about the production of this film, it's been a while since I really did a deep dive, but from what I remember, Spielberg loved the script, but he was like, it's something I don't know if I would be, it's in my wheelhouse to direct right now, because he was like the hottest director ever, but he's like, but I'll produce it, and then I'll make sure that you can have fun doing it. And then he wound up just like showing up every day on set anyway. Because
directing full scenes too.
Right. And so like, I think partially just because Spielberg famously was really good with kids on set, and I think he made it probably like feel like a party. It was like going to a water park for 30 days in a row.
Wow.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So Andy, like, maybe the darkest part of this movie is how much Andy seems to be losing it initially as they go deeper and deeper into this. That seems to just like disappear after a while. Like, she's not disassociating later in the movie when things are arguably much scarier and more dire.
Well, she's through the looking glass at that point. She's completely lost all sense of reality.
They find the dead body, the skeleton really, of Chester Copperpot, and they find a bunch of candles, but one of them is very clearly dynamite, and so there's a sort of a Russian roulette element to every time they light a candle going forward in this movie.
All of the skeletons in this movie were real skeletons except for One-Eyed Willie at the end. Did you know that?
Is that true?
No way.
Yeah.
That's kind of messed up.
Why?
That's what I'm saying. Is like you begin here with this one, and then it's just like skeleton parade for real.
I've always thought maybe I would donate my body to science, but now I think maybe I'll donate it to Steven Spielberg for use in Hollywood films.
I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of those skeletons that you saw in the movie thought they were dedicating their bodies to science and wound up just being props. I will say, though, as a kid, I was very skeleton pilled. Like, you had Pirates of the Caribbean, you had Skeletor. Like, if there was the bone mech that's inside your body, like, I'm in. And this, I think this totally leans into that sort of aesthetic that was very popular.
I'm just full of trivia for this movie. When you said Pirates of the Caribbean, it made me think that the ship at the end, they didn't have any plan for. And they were like, anyone can have it who wants it for free. No one wanted it. So they busted it up, and they gave a bunch of its parts to Disney for them to use on their Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Like, a bunch of stuff from that ship lives on those rides.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's cool. It's also insane to me that there wasn't like some entrepreneurial dude that lives in Cannon Beach, Oregon, that's just like, I have a pirate ship. Pay me $5, you can kill a skeleton.
There's your seaside restaurant.
Oh, man.
Yeah, at least a restaurant.
I would pay so much money. Yeah, like, make the Casa Bonita of pirate-themed Oregon seaside restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tuberculosis, or your meal is free.
You're going to be printing money.
What do you want?
Lots of water. Look how far we've come. We got a chance. Chance at what, Mikey? Getting killed? Don't say that. Never say that. Goonies never say die. Die. Die.
Speaking of printing money, there was that moment that we probably skipped over where Data realizes that the Fratellis are running a counterfeiting operation at this place.
But it starts out not like, oh my God, they're running a counterfeit operation. It starts out like, hey guys, our problems are solved. Forget about the pirates.
We can save save our houses.
Let's just have this be a counterfeit ring that we run as kids.
Is it that we're seeing this film in HD that makes these bills look like absolute trash, though? These are the worst counterfeit bills maybe I've ever seen in a movie.
They look like they were run off on a photocopier. They're bad.
Yeah. Well, I think there was a deal that was made. I could be making this up, but I feel like I read this somewhere, that there was a deal that was made with the Secret Service that if at any time you have like stacks of fake cash in a movie, they have to be like obviously identifiable in some way as not real currency. And
big white frames happen to have worked in this one.
Right.
I have a friend that worked in the art department on a pretty big Hollywood movie that had like a briefcase full of cash scene. And they needed like a lot of bills because it was going to like come apart. And they were using Adobe software to make their stunt money. And they got a visit from the Secret Service going like, what are you doing?
Really? Like Adobe flagged them somehow? Like spyware?
It totally flagged them. And they actually got permission from the Secret Service after that because they came and they were like, oh, you guys are making a movie. This is an acceptable use of like plausible but not actual money being made.
As long as we get a part in the film. My niece needs to be Taft-Hartley'd.
So another hole opens up because they've triggered all these booty traps, and this one has a bunch of bats that fly out of it. But they go into that and they find a waterfall and what initially looks like the treasure. But then you realize it's like pennies and nickels and stuff.
Which I just want to say that that is a very clever way to kind of at least give them one more option than just going forward of this wishing well scene. I thought that this felt like something that was clearly not in the original idea that Spielberg had for the film. He just like, oh, they just find a treasure map, and clearly Chris Columbus like found this moment to have it be like are we truly giving up at this midpoint of the film, or are we gonna double down and embrace this one last summer, gang? And I thought there was a really great little moment there when Mouth, holds up a coin. He's like, they're like, don't. So one of the girls is like, you don't take those coins. Those are people's wishes. And he's like, yeah, well, this is my wish, and it didn't come true, so I'm taking it back.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really kind of powerful in a way. I got like goosebumps rewatching that moment as an adult.
Corey Feldman's really good in this movie.
Yeah, you got to assume that his wish is saving the Goondocks, right? Like
No, he wanted a monster truck.
Yeah, but so he's embittered as a child. And
I'm going to use this to buy Hot Wheels.
He always wanted to see Michelangelo's David in real life to figure out what direction the penis goes. Aaron, that is a great point because it also provides an off-ramp to scared characters. And by not taking this exit, I think it really helps solidify like how newly heroic someone like Andy is.
Yeah.
For choosing not to leave.
Totally.
Yeah, because I think otherwise they have the Fratellis at their heels. There's the cave that's the only way forward, and they're not really. There's no agency there. But instead, they took this really kind of what seems like a diversion from the main plot, and actually becomes a critical sort of choice point of everybody involved to say we're doing this by hook or by crook.
I also feel like if death is truly on the line, they all leave.
Right.
Like if it's absolutely a choice between life and death, I think they're going up the well.
So Andy rejects Troy via his sweater and embraces the Goonie identity and lifestyle And on the adventure goes. Chunk, meanwhile, has been like spilling his guts about every bad thing he ever did.
Great gag.
Yeah.
Classic trope done very well, I think.
And to show violence without actual violence, like the stuff in the blender painting the picture, I thought was such a great visual touch.
Yeah, the Hagemans and I always joke about, or like harken back to that joke from that scene, which it goes on for a long time. I think there's like actually 3 distinct scenes where we cut back to Chunk being tortured. And at the very end of it, Mrs. Fratelli's like, set it to puree. And then she grabs his hand and starts to shove it in there. And he goes, no, I was going to learn the violin.
His hand goes in the blender jar. It's an incredible stunt.
He is danger close.
They would not allow that on family television these days. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
It's imitatable.
Anyways, he's been locked up with Sloth and makes friends with Sloth because he gives Sloth a baby Ruth. Meanwhile, the gang down in the tunnels have found a new lock, and I guess they got something off of Chester Copperpot or whatever.
Yeah, when they pulled it off of his neck, his head fell off, and they all went, ew, and then put his head back.
So we get like another Rube Goldberg machine. Like, I think this is the third in the movie because the traps were kind of a Rube Goldberg machine. And then there's this, and it almost kills Data, who goes down a hole and gets really cranky.
Yeah, what's interesting about, there's a way that you can read this movie that it's actually, the whole storyline is about dueling inventors in a way.
Right.
Because Data's using his inventions and he's trying to, and they're trying to outsmart these inventions that were left behind by One-Eyed Willie. Like, either it's like a cat and mouse game between inventors trying to out-invent each other across time, or there is a way you could read this film that it's structured like Willy Wonka, where like Wonka is like a mad genius that is ready to like pass the crown of Rube Goldberg machines. And the whole movie is a test to see if Data and or the Goonies are worthy.
Yeah.
As a successor.
I like that read.
What kind of selfish person gets off on like accumulating the vast pirate wealth that One-Eyed Willie has done and then makes it so that it never gets distributed to anyone? Like, by setting up all these traps, I think it's understood that no one will ever find it, right? Or is it his sick fetish that like he wants to torment people trying to get it?
I think he's like that guy that got the high score of Donkey Kong and then refused to let anyone else ever get the high score by becoming a member of the board that chooses who the Twin Galaxy world records of video games, and was like actively preventing people. The King of Kong. It was a King of Kong situation is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he was King of Kong. Yeah.
This has happened 1,000 times, but the prequel version of this movie is the One-Eyed Willie story. And how the hell he gets his pirate crew to dig all these tunnels and set up all these traps. And what a huge fucking bummer that had to be to live that way.
What the human cost would have been every time you're like setting up a trap and you like slip and it takes you out, you know?
I mean, I would totally watch that Discovery Channel series about the people trying to unearth the mystery of Oak Island, but for One-Eyed Willie, and just reconstruct like what was their mentality. Because after a while, you know, I think they say at the beginning of the movie, like they did this for like 7 years. Yeah. And I feel like somewhere along the line, there's got to have been one guy that was just like, is this tunnel enough, Willie? Is this tunnel enough?
There's not a lot of vegetation in those caves. I think it's pretty obvious that they ate each other.
Sad.
Somewhere along the line.
Well, they might have eaten octopi. Because unless I'm mistaken, I think there was a deleted scene where when they get to the treasure cave, there is a giant octopus that also fights them, sort of.
Data mentions it at the very end.
Yeah.
To the press.
Oh, man.
We got you now, One-Eyed Willie. We're coming up right behind you.
Chunk calls the sheriff, and it turns out that Chunk has a little bit of a cry wolf problem where he's told them a bunch of bullshit stories before. So they're not inclined to believe his treasure under a restaurant story. There's a little Gremlins reference in this, in a list of fake crimes he's phoned in, which I liked.
Just like that last prank about all those little creatures that multiply when you throw water on them.
Which confirms to me that all Spielberg-produced movies, all Amblin films, take place in the same universe. So like the town over, E.T. was captured.
If you look at the date on the newspaper in this movie, this is the date of Marty's first jump in the DeLorean.
Whoa.
What?
It's the same day.
Amazing.
Isn't that nuts?
Yes. So Marty was at Twin Pines Mall. E.T. was wherever that movie was taking place.
What a day.
And they were all setting up post-credits teases for when the Avengers would assemble.
Ben, was this the scene where Chunk and Sloth share the baby Ruth?
I think that was the previous scene, but now they're like allied with each other against the other Fratellis.
There's something about that scene I wanted to talk about, which was hiding a split diopter in a shadow in a composition I thought was so fucking cool. I'd never seen that before. Like usually you see the blur of the diopter and it totally gives it away.
Yeah.
But the way that shot is composed totally hides it. It's great.
A great shot, yeah. So there's this weird piss break sequence where like the boys are going to go down one tunnel and piss and the girls are going to go down another tunnel and piss. And this is going to be an opportunity for Andy and Brand to make out, I guess.
When my wife and I were watching this movie, she was like, why didn't they just piss in the well? It's like a giant urinal down there.
But those are people's wishes, Adam.
Yeah, you can't piss on the wishes.
Andy goes and does a make out, but it's not with who she thinks it is. It's with Brand's little brother, Mikey.
That happened in a lot of 80s movies, I feel like. It was in Revenge of the Nerds, definitely. And this is sort of a prequel to Revenge of the Nerds.
This sort of put in my head that my best chance at a first kiss would be someone else's mistake.
Right.
Aren't they all?
Yeah.
Yes, I consider myself a nerd, and this movie has uplifted me.
They remain mistakes.
Totally.
For the other person.
Yeah, the messaging could be better. One thing I thought was well done about this movie was so many of the like different phases of holes that they go through, like what they have done has eased the road for the Fratellis who are following them. So the Fratellis are like moving at a much quicker pace through this labyrinth than the Goonies are. And it really does a great job of like amplifying the pressure every time we cut back to the Fratellis. Because you're like, oh, fuck, they're already through there? What? How?
Yeah, this movie does a lot with very little of just occasionally cutting back to the Fratellis just walking very intently down tunnels.
Totally.
And that they give like the sound of Anne Ramsey marching like that
Going,
with like, the grunting. This is a very unfriendly film to the greatness of Anne Ramsey, who I really like, but they make her into a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything is slightly elevated to a borderline cartoon level.
Right.
I think is part of the charm of this particular type of film.
For sure.
So there's like this river in between them and the Fratellis who are now like actually opening fire on the kids. And the kids are like running down this tunnel to where there's a bone shrine that has like a piano keyboard of finger bones on it. They're reading new clues from the map periodically, and this one happens to be there's some sheet music on the back of the map. And so Andy is the only one that like knows how to read music, so she has to put in the thing, but she's not that good at reading music. So pieces of the floor keep plopping out from under them.
Indiana Jones style. I will confess that this scene actually gave me nightmares as a kid. Not because of the sort of morbid iconography of the piano keys being made of skeleton fingers, but rather because I took piano lessons as a kid and I could not tell what any of the keys were. I was like, how is she going to do it? I don't know what those keys are.
Yeah.
This is nothing like my mother's Steinway. Do something, hurry!
This is a great scene for sound design, too. The organ sounds so great. And the wrong key of the organ sounds especially great and scary.
Yeah.
So was it geothermically powered? Is that what we're to assume?
That is such a Q&A question at a movie convention. Are we to believe that this was geothermically powered.
Get a light. Because it's not a string instrument. They could have made it a piano and I would have no questions, but they have steam shooting out. So
I mean, all of these, like the Indiana Jones movies, anytime somebody's in a tomb or whatever, raiding it, and there's lots of like moving parts in the way the tomb operates, it's like, how is this working? Like,
who's maintaining this?
Yeah.
Is this a dungeon-based economy?
Yeah. Like, is there lube between the two panels of rock that are supposed to slide aside perfectly?
I'm willing to let it slide. I just have to, in my head canon, assume that there is some sort of geothermic caldera that is beneath this cave system, that Willie, in his forward thinking in the 1600s, realized he could create a loose sort of steam engine of sorts that powered his infernal machine.
Yeah.
That's why he was the best in his day, you know? Well, you also have to let the Goonies slide, Aaron Waltke, because they slide down a water slide into a huge cavern that has a giant pirate ship in the middle of it. And they go up in the pirate ship. It takes a very long time for them to explore it, but eventually they find a shit ton of trash.
And I do love that they just kind of left all of these pirates in like whatever pose they happen to be on, and then they turn the head and there's two daggers sticking out of both eyes.
Those look like fancy daggers.
Yeah. Like that's when Why Willie had basically become the Mad King and had, you know, Alexander wept for there were no more worlds to conquer. And so he was just straight up killing all of his pirate crew one by one in really elaborate ways.
I thought it was interesting that the final boss was the bone organ. Like, I remain surprised as an adult that we get to the ship right after this, because I thought there would be something even more threatening or difficult. Like, this is a nerd test. A kid who takes piano lessons was the difference between life and death in this moment. Yeah. And succeeding in getting to the ship meant Andy being the hero in such an unusual way, unexpected way.
If they'd kept the octopus fight scene in, she wouldn't have been quite that level of hero.
Because that was going to happen after this.
Right.
That would have been the Threshold Guardian.
Yeah.
So you're saying you advocate for the director's cut only.
Always do.
Yeah. So the Fratellis catch them with all of this money that would have been what they would use to save the town. They start, you know, making them walk the plank. Andy goes into the drink and Brolin goes in to rescue her. But then Chunk and Sloth show up and do like Buccaneer knife slide down the mainsail into the fray to stop the Fratellis.
How much do you love the Luke and Yoda slide of a puppet Chunk coming down that sail? That looked so cool to me.
From what I could tell, the geography of the scene implied that Sloth saw that his friends were in danger and then proceeded to climb methodically up to the top of the crow's nest, only to do his cool, Rob Roy sail slide.
No,
got to make an entrance.
Were you ever scared of Sloth as a kid, Aaron?
I wasn't scared of Sloth, but I do have a confession to make, which is in my perhaps pop culture addled 5 or 6 year old mind when I first saw this film. I thought that Sloth and the Toxic Avenger were the same character at different points of his life.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think you're trained at an early age, if you're our age, to fear the ugly or the different in a way that this film like directly comes at. Like, Sloth is a prisoner. Sloth is innocent. Sloth was abused by his mother.
Yeah.
And Sloth is kind. If you just give the broken toy a chance, like, you can be friends. And that was definitely one of the messages from this film.
Like, Sloth has so much love in his heart.
Yeah. I don't want to cut to the end too soon, but like the laugh that it got out of me that Chunk's family is going to adopt Sloth, and it's up to Chunk that happens.
Right. He just says, "You're coming with me, buddy."
He's wearing the Hawaiian shirt in that family.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have more to talk about that scene, but we could get there later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that this was an interesting period of filmmaking in particular. Like, I was a Ninja Turtles kid, and so much of that was
I
like,
was too.
oh yeah, the weird mutants in the sewer are actually the heroes that are looking out for you kind, beautiful people on the surface, working at Wall Street and keeping our economy afloat.
Oh, yeah.
Rockabye baby on the treetop.
This is like a kind of long and weird melee that involves Sloth tying up his brothers and their mom, and then like everybody is like swimming away from the boat.
A lot of kids get thrown from great height into this water. It's exhilarating to watch every time.
Yeah. So they're like saving themselves, and the bad guys get the gold. And I thought this was a really nice, like, little bit of natural resolution to all the booby traps. They didn't have to deal with any of them. They don't know that they were booby traps necessarily, even. And so
that's interesting. From the Fratelli's perspective, they just like, these kids went in this weird cave. We chased
where
them.
all these like big rocks are on the floor. Like,
that's a great call. They missed the action of it completely.
So there starts to be booby traps for them. The kids are like trying to escape, and they light their last candle, and it turns out to be the dynamite stick. So they blow a hole, and it triggers a cave in. So they're like gonna get away, but Sloth has to come lift a big rock that has plugged up the aperture of the cave. And we see that like some of the wall out to the ocean is now crumbling.
So I have a question about that moment, or I guess the lead up to that moment. There's a triumphant moment where Sloth, in his confrontation of his abusive family, tears off his shirt and is wearing a Superman shirt underneath it. And then you hear the Richard Donner Superman theme play, which, of course, this movie was directed by Richard Donner.
Yeah. We're in deep shit now, Francis. Oh, shit.
Was that set up at all and I missed it? Or was it just simply Richard Donner being like, you know what? It's my movie.
The only thing I could think of was maybe Sloth was watching Superman on TV, because you do see somebody do the pirate move down the sail on the TV.
It makes me wonder if that was also on the cutting room floor of like if you saw that, you know, that he changes the channel at some point and it's the Richard Donner Superman movie. And so, because it felt like a payoff without a setup, and I didn't mind it. And it's obviously one of the most iconic moments of the film. Yeah. Because Sloth in the Superman shirt is everywhere and it's entered our pop culture lexicon. Totally. But I watching it as an adult, I was like, oh, this is just Richard Donner doffing his cap to himself for seemingly no reason.
Yeah, it's a little homage to himself.
Yeah.
John Matuzak is the guy who plays Sloth, and he's an ex-football player. And this is like a moment that makes clear that he's not just strong. He like looks strong physically. He's enormous as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is an absolutely massive law enforcement response to the missing Goonies going on.
Everybody in the town shows up on the beach.
Yeah.
The budget for the Goondocks' police department, enormous.
It's so big.
It's any wonder this place doesn't have a social safety net for the people about to lose their homes.
You know, they have a bunch of SWAT gear that they didn't need that they purchased. A tank.
Why did they have a submarine?
They got one of those helicopters with the wings and the missiles. Yeah. Why do they need that as a police department?
Exhilarating driving on the beach scene, though. Like, this is really fun.
Yeah, so the Goonies come up out of the cave onto the beach and are reunited with their families. Sloth is going to go live with Chunk because they love each other so much. And even though Sloth is like probably 35 or something based on the age of his brothers.
And they met about 17 minutes ago in universe time.
I wanted the moment where Sloth comes home to be a part of the post-credit scene so bad. Like, what? How does that go with Chunk's parents?
Well, Chunk's parents seem to be game for anything. So they arrive on the beach with the Domino's pizza, like ready to go. Like they have an emergency hot and ready, like in a portable oven in their car.
They seem like such loving parents in that way, right?
Totally.
I mean, dude, if anytime I like get off work or I pick someone up, they're like, "Hey, thanks for coming," and they open up a pizza just with almost like as a matter of fact, I'm like, am I in nirvana? This is the best life I could possibly live.
The dark read of this is like, well, that's the reason why your mom and pop shoreside seafood restaurants close. It's the proliferation of chain restaurants in this beach community that's made it impossible to do business.
Big Pizza Hut is knocking them out.
Totally. I mean, Taco Bell won the restaurant wars, right?
Yeah.
So there's this moment of like melancholy, like the Fratellis get arrested, but then they're like, damn, like the Stooges from the country club are here with the paperwork to like sign over the house.
Yeah, they were listening to the
the police scanner,
police spotter. There they are.
It's as if the signing the deed is like being served papers. Like you must have it done to you physically,
like a subpoena.
Yeah. That's what I mean. That's how this scene feels like.
But like as their dad is about to sign this paperwork, Rosalita finds the bag of gems that the Mikey, I guess, got out of the cave and
put in his marble bag.
The Fratellis have been arrested. You could just go back into the cave now that the cave-in has died down and get the ship, right?
The law about salvage at sea is that if you take anything off of it, everything on that ship is yours.
Yeah.
You just need to get whatever you can off of it in order to establish salvage rights to it.
Yeah, that's maritime law.
I'm so glad that we have noted maritime juris doctor Adam Pranica on this show.
It's important to know that for this scene to make sense.
Well, unfortunately, there was a clause in the contract that his dad half signed that said, if it's the last day of summer and we had one last adventure, then you're not allowed to claim treasure anymore at the last minute.
What is up with Mike's dad having the most Christopher Kimball vibes maybe of all time? What is this guy's deal?
There was a line that I actually wrote down because as a kid, it didn't stand out to me. But now as an adult watching, it seems like a bit of an extreme reaction in which after they find these gems and he tears up the contract and it says, "No more signing today or ever again." I'm like, wait, no contracts? Like no gods, no laws?
I love the angle up of him throwing the torn up contract up and then clearly 3 other torn up contracts also go into the air at the same time.
I abolish tort law.
What a moment.
I mean, he's rich enough to make that kind of decree now that he...
he becomes a robber baron. He buys the Goondocks and becomes a petty tyrant.
Interesting that like this is effectively the moment the film ends. This film is not interested in punishing bad guys because these fucking asshole developers like remain free to go do their bad developer deals. Like this is a film about concluding on a positive note where the Goonies are going to be okay and they're going to be able to live where they want to live for as long as they want to live there.
That's true. I mean, I think the story is contracts are no longer valid in the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
And the Goonies never say die.
What you don't see is the idea that the Christopher Kimball dad has in opening that seafood restaurant again, losing all of the money that they got off of that pirate ship and then having to sell their house over to those fucking assholes again.
Right. So like Mikey's dad, he worked at the local history museum. And then it was the history museum just like firing him and that's why they had to move? Or was it a volunteer position? It was never quite clear to me.
I mean, his job is hard and he comes home drunk sometimes. Maybe he gets a little violent with his wife. All of a sudden there's like an accident with the arm. You could see a pretty dark read here for how that goes.
There was a cut scene that took place at the museum where they cast Julia Collin-Davidson and Bridget Lancaster as the other 2 people that worked there, and you could just tell that they were very uncomfortable around him.
I mean, it's possible he was just fired for stealing artifacts, which I'm pretty sure is frowned upon.
What's he doing with that framed map in his attic?
Don't go up there. Don't ever go up there. Don't tell anybody what you saw up there.
Wow.
I got a guy who's going to fence this shit for millions.
Yeah, in retrospect, no wonder.
Maybe that was his plan to save the house. And these kids ruined it.
Oh, like he was planning to go on a Goonies adventure, and then like those kids, he was like, "Oh, you did it, kids!"
Yeah,
God damn it,
lanky
like,
guy. I don't know if he would have fit in some of those tunnels.
Well, I mean, Sloth made it all the way through, so
he did.
It's possible.
It's true. Yeah, I thought for sure Chunk and Sloth were going to be the butt of a joke when they try and go into that trap door. Like, oh, Chunk is too chunky, Sloth is too burly. Like,
yeah,
this movie isn't mean.
It's never mean
like that.
Yeah,
no, I think the most you could say is like it's maybe slightly problematic for Chunk to own every gag just to be about like him eating, but everyone just seems to celebrate it about him.
I mean, he's also clumsy, Aaron.
Right.
Let's not sell him short.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we rate this thing? Did you guys like the motion picture, The Goonies?
You klutz. Hope he's got a deposit bottle.
I liked it far more than I thought I would in rewatching. Like, I was prepared to be disappointed by yet another childhood enjoyment destroyed because I viewed it through a modern lens. No, I was exhilarated by this. So funny. Like, legitimately, it had me laughing at many points in this film. And a movie I kind of want to go back and rewatch again every once in a while. Like, it held up. It's fast. Like, the pace of it really cooks. Like, set piece to set piece to set piece to close. If you can get on Mikey's level, I would say, like, the one part of the movie that I didn't love 100% is like the sanctimony of the Mikey is something that, like, you need to really be with his energy or else he's gonna ring a little bit like, all right, kid.
Like, where the whole time he's just like, so One-Eyed Willie, this is what you wanted to show me. I am a Goonie.
Or like, down here it's our time. Like, right. As if he's reading from an off-screen teleprompter, you know? Like, like he's so eloquent. He's eloquent in the way Mouth should be, because Mouth is established as like an adult in a kid's body.
Talker, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's my take. I really liked it. I liked watching this again with you guys.
Yeah, I suggested this movie, and I will admit that I've rewatched scenes, but I have not watched it like beginning to end since probably I was a teenager or something, and I really enjoyed it. I think that there is a certain aesthetic, I think, of that I miss in modern film. It's almost like a hangout movie, but it has elements of wonder and fantasy that you just kind of everyone rolls with because they all know correctly that it'll be more fun if we just accept this. That nowadays I think you have to over-explain every single little detail, or you have somebody creating a YouTube video saying plot holes, cinema sins. And I think that there's that whole genre of films of like Batteries Not Included and E.T. and a few others I've mentioned that evoke that. And I think Goonies perfectly encapsulates all of that. It does not feel like a 2-hour plus movie. Like if watching it because it flows so quickly and you're on board with every scene and everything has a purpose and you love the characters, it just sweeps you along. And I think I'll always appreciate it for that.
Yeah, I was delighted to discover this movie for the first time, and I thought it was interesting that you like cited E.T. and Batteries Not Included, because I totally agree. Like the music and the energy of this movie like took me right back to those, and I think that's part of why I expected this to be more of a sci-fi or fantasy inflected thing than it was, because I think I just like hear it come up in conversations about that era of movies, and I'm like, the rest of them are that. So that it's kind of an interesting artifact that it's just like a pretty straight, like it's a slightly Looney Tunesy, but otherwise fairly realistic adventure film where, I mean, like, yeah, and I guess like when you see Sloth on a poster and you have no context for what that is, maybe that's like part of the reason I made the assumption that it was like set in some kind of magical reality.
Yeah, I feel like there is a version of this film where the skeletons come to life and there's like stop motion battles and like, oh no, the curse of One-Eyed Willie. But
well, I really wonder what the octopus looked like in the in the scene that they cut, because that sort of seems like it would be stop motion.
From what I remember, they did sort of a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like there's some footage that you can see, I think, or maybe images of it was just like tentacles that are just kind of reaching out. But I think perhaps rightly, despite the Threshold Guardian necessity of it all, once you see that pirate ship, you just want to get on the pirate ship.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Fun movie. Thanks for sharing it with me, gentlemen.
Aaron, why don't you go wait over there so we can review some Priority 1 messages?
No, Aaron, sit down. We got this.
God, Aaron really wants to read these, but we muted his mic.
Yeah, you're muted. No, Aaron, you're out of line. You're muted. They can't hear you.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
We got a promotional message here. It goes like this. Do you like mystery and crime podcasts? Take up where the podcast leaves off and solve the mystery yourself. Alchemy Investigations is a unique podcast and RPG project hosted by investigator Ichabod M. Groster. Every episode features an unsolved mystery that becomes a system-agnostic tabletop RPG adventure for you and your friends to solve for free. Enjoy as a podcast or download the modules to play on your next game night. Listen to the podcast, roll those dice, solve the mystery. Wow.
Everyone's having game nights.
Yeah, you gotta have a game night, man.
Nah, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm glad everyone's having them, though. They seem like they're having fun.
So subscribe to the Alchemy Investigations podcast, available now on all podcast platforms, and visit alchemyinvestigations.com.
This, of course, came from the mind of Ichabod M. Groster, one of the best DMs in the biz.
Yeah. There's a pronunciation guide that leaves me still confused about whether it's Groster or Groster, but I think you're probably right. What a great premise. I feel like a lot of these DMs, these RPG premise come-upper-withers, are charging big bucks for their services. Not Ichabod. Putting it out there in the world, gratis.
Imagine thinking about and doing something after the podcast you listen to is over. I mean... Try to imagine a world where you do more than just delete a podcast after you listen to it.
I don't even do that.
Alchemyinvestigations.com. Pretty great.
I just let him eat up all of the storage space on my phone ad infinitum.
Nothing about that surprises me. Then we got a personal Priority 1 message here, and it is from Robbie. It's to FODs everywhere.
Aaron, we're almost done. Can you just... All right.
The message goes like this. The power of having Ben and Adam say your words is unbounded joy.
Wow.
Get Jumbotron messages. You will not regret it. Also, is Wynde funnier than Adam? Ben says yes, Adam says no. What do we say? 350 characters, another random drop? Can anyone loan me $100?
Hello, what are you doing?
Forming a miracle.
He put babu bee babu ba.
Yeah, I'm sure Wynde would love that. Put it up to a poll.
Uh-huh.
How about no?
And Robbie is going to borrow $100 to weigh in on this question that they've posed?
Sounds great. Robbie's broken the P1 pool cue and put it in the middle of me and Wynde and Ben.
No kidding. That's great. Well, thanks to everyone who got a P1 today. It's MaximumFun.org/Jumbotron if you would like to get one for yourself. You know, be that promoting your RPG podcast or potentially causing a giant rift between the three people that toil day in, day out to bring you these shows.
It's always worth it because they help with the production of our shows. And thank you. Aaron, we do one thing at the end of every show and movie we watch is we figure out who the Edward Larkin is of that watching experience. This is the character that stood out to you for a funny or weird way, or the moment that bumped you in one of those ways. Who's your Edward Larkin for the Goonies?
Edward Larkin!
Or Who's My Barnus Frex, for that matter.
You know.
Gosh, I mean, I think for me, it has to be Chunk. Like he's almost like living in his own movie through this whole ordeal. You know, whether it's the truffle shuffle, which became so iconic, even though it's only the way I remembered that was like it was in like every other scene, but it only happens like once.
And it was like 3 minutes long in my memory. I was shocked that it was like less than maybe even 5 seconds.
It's almost like an afterthought of just like a secret handshake. And
and it's like kind of filmed from the back. Like you don't even really get a great look at it.
Yeah. But the fact that you know, every time you cut back to him, he's getting into trouble, trying to eat ice cream. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a version of this draft where he gets on the pirate ship, he's eating like centuries old rotten grapes. And he's like, they're raisins now. Like Chunk just kind of lives on his own wavelength. And I think we should all be so lucky to follow in his footsteps.
I think as important as every casting choice was in this movie, if you don't get Chunk right with Jeff Cohen, like this film is half as good. He is so fun and funny as Chunk.
Yeah, there's one scene I think when they're torturing him, and somehow he like falls to the floor, and like within not even half a second they cut to him on the floor, and he somehow has ice cream, and he's eating the ice cream, and then they take the ice cream away from him, and then he frowns, but then he pulls up a spoon and he starts eating the spoon with the licking last bits of ice cream off, and then they take the spoon away, and he goes, oh, and that's the cut. It's brilliant.
Cutting mid-sound was such a great choice there for comedy.
Totally.
Yes.
Aaron, I know that scene probably felt super familiar to you as the father of a small child. Like sometimes when you're feeding them and you need to take something away, I was like, oh man, like I've been there. I know how it'd be, the Fratellis.
Yes, I was Fratelli pilled in that moment.
Ben, who's your Edward Larkin or Barnus Ricks?
I want to give it to Joey Pants. I thought he was so game for this. Like he is such a fucking great actor, and I guess it was probably like pretty early in his career, but he is as silly and dopey as his character needs to be, but also feels so dangerous in that way that he is so good at. Like,
yeah,
he's a threat to his mom and his brother and the kids and himself in this way that is just so chaotic feeling in every scene he's in. He really does a great job of just putting you off balance. Like, and also like lets himself be the butt of the joke in such great ways. Like, I don't have a hairpiece.
And then it flies off. Yeah.
I didn't remember him being in this movie the way that, like, as an adult, you clock Joey Pantoliano and you're like, oh yeah, that's him. Like, he popped up in Midnight Run a couple of weeks ago and I was like, holy shit. Like, he's so great in everything he does.
He is the best. He really fucking rules.
I only notice him when a Gen Alpha kid points out that he was in the first Matrix movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Cypher.
Aaron, you mentioned earlier the joke about throwing something off screen and then hearing a crash.
Yeah.
My Edward Larkin is very closely related to that. Sloth pushing the pipes up through the roof of the cave and causing the massive car accident and police incident topside. Maybe the biggest laugh out of me for the entire movie, because that is one of my favorite kinds of comedy, is that like pause and look around while you're hearing the awful thing happen all around you.
Right.
So much fun.
And I think it wouldn't have worked if they had not dedicated 7 minutes to showing all of that chaos before.
Yeah.
That you just get to imagine whatever insanity he did by pushing that back up.
Great value for that shot, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally.
And he goes, uh-oh, and then move on.
Well, we always close out every episode with a warning bois. This is the segment where we express our appreciation for folks who talk about our show online, helps get the word out.
Prepare a buoy and launch it when ready.
Warning buoys.
An emergency buoy. A warning buoy.
This one's from X, but I also saw it on Blue Sky. Tom Servo is my spirit bot at the Mahale said, 2 things. Low Value put out a new Greatest Gen video of a recent exchange on the pod that I was secretly hoping they'd do. And 2, this was the most recent video uploaded, which means that, at least in this case, at Greatest Trek will now and forever be number 69. So Low Value, the YouTube account that has animated our podcast a few times, just put out their 69th video, and it's us again talking about Vulcan raid on a compound on Star Trek Enterprise, which we made great hay of, and it's great to see that animation. Really appreciated Low Value doing that, and I love that we're number 69 and that Tom Servo is my spirit. Bob pointed that out.
Aaron, how great is it that when people make things out of your things?
It's amazing.
That's such a thrill for us.
Just the other day, I saw somebody had photoshopped my head onto Mirror Universe Chakotay. Great honor.
Boy, that statement could have ended in all kinds of ways.
Did you have the tat still?
No.
Okay, well.
I'm not Chakotay. I'm my own Mirror Universe guy with a hot bod.
I see. Yeah. Well, you guys actually told the actor to get ready to have his bod look that hot. Unlike the
and then we forgot to mention it was an animated show. Yeah.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us so long, Aaron. This has been so much fun. Love anytime we get to talk to you about Star Trek or anything else.
Hey, my pleasure. And glad I can finally announce that I'm officially joining the podcast as a permanent third co-host.
Oh, shit!
Amazing. Can't say no now. It's on the show.
It's on the record.
Yeah, it's official.
See you next week for Lower Decks, huh?
Yeah, I'll see you there.
We'll catch you next time. We'll let our producer, Wynde, take it from here. Bye-bye.
Greatest Trek is an Uxbridge Shimoda podcast on the Maximum Fun Network. It's hosted by Ben Harrison and Adam Pranica, and it's produced and edited by Wynde Priddy. Next week, we're back to New Trek. Lower Decks Season 5 will be premiering with 2 episodes next week, so we'll be covering the first one on Friday and the next one on an extra pod the Tuesday after that. As always, we want to thank the Max Fun members who support this show financially. Not only do members keep us going, they get access to all of the network's bonus content, plus the new bonus episodes being released every single month. You can set up your membership in just a few minutes at MaximumFun.org/join, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to Nick Dittmore, who created the show art, and Adam Ragusea, who composed the theme music. Thanks to Rob Adler and Bill Tilley for their work on the @GreatestTrek social media pages. Follow those accounts and use the hashtag #GreatestTrek when you post about the show online. Greatest Trek is also on YouTube, so find us over there, and you can get subscribed to the Greatest newsletter and find yourself some funny merch at podshop.biz. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on Greatest Trek.
Maximum Fun, a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported
directly
by you.